찾지만 야매 너와 나 우린 같이 남는 걸 너와 나의 사이의 시간은
The rain had been falling steadily all day, a relentless drumming against the window panes that seemed to echo the turmoil in Vian's heart. She had been driving for hours, the wipers barely keeping pace with the downpour, when the engine of her old sedan coughed its last breath and left her stranded on the side of a deserted country road. With no signal on her phone and the rain obscuring any hope of a distant light, Vian had no choice but to seek shelter on foot. She trudged through the mud, her coat soaked through, until the faint outline of a house emerged from the mist. It was an imposing structure, its once grand facade now succumbing to the relentless grip of ivy and time. The gate creaked ominously as she pushed it open, and the path to the front door was littered with fallen branches and leaves, as if nature itself was trying to reclaim the land. Vian hesitated, but the cold bite of the wind urged her forward, and with a deep breath she approached the heavy wooden door and knocked. There was no answer, but the door opened under her, revealing a dimly lit hallway lined with portraits of people whose eyes seemed to follow her every move. A shiver ran down her spine, but the storm outside was fierce and the house foreboding, as it was offered a chance of warmth and dryness. She stepped inside, the door closing behind her with a finality that made her heart skip a beat. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock with a hypnotic rhythm. Vian called out, hoping for an answer, but only her echo returned to her. And then she sat in the flickering light of the fireplace, her fingers dancing nervously along the armrest of the chair. Her eyes darted about the room, taking in every detail, every creak, every shadow. Her heart raced uncontrollably, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. She knew something wasn't right, that there was someone else in the house with her. "Hello?" she called out, her voice quivering. "Is someone there?" There was no response, only the relentless howling of the wind. She forced herself to stand, her legs trembling beneath her, and slowly made her way across the room. She paused by the door, her hand over the knob, when she heard a voice behind her. "Don't even think about it," it said softly. The tone was oddly familiar, yet she couldn't quite place it. She turned around, her heart sinking into her stomach. Standing in the shadows by the fireplace was a figure, his face obscured by the darkness. "You're mine now," he continued, taking a step forward. "And you're going to stay that way." The room seemed to grow colder as he spoke. She forced herself to stand tall, trying to maintain a semblance of bravery. "Who are you?" she managed to. "Why are you doing this?" The figure took another step closer, his hands now visible. They were covered in expensive jewelry and fresh. "Oh, sweetheart," he said with a chuckle. "You should know better than to ask questions like that." Her breath caught in her throat as he took another step toward her. I don't understand," she stammered. What do you want from me?" "I want you," he replied simply. "I want everything you have and everything you are. And tonight, my dear, you're going to give it all to me." His voice was like silk. "So why don't you come here and we'll see what happens?" She took a hesitant step back, her heart pounding in her chest. But why me?" she whispered. "Why does it have to be me?" The figure smiled, revealing teeth stained red with "Because you're perfect," he whispered. "You're just what I've been looking for." As he closed the distance between them, emanating from his, the power that seemed to radiate from every pore. She wanted to run, to scream, to fight back. But something held her there, paralyzed by fear and the strange feeling that she was meant for this, meant to be with him. The figure reached out and brushed a strand of hair away from her face. His sent shivers down her spine. "Don't be afraid," he murmured. "I'm going to take care of you now." And with that, he pulled her into his arms, engulfing her in darkness, and she could feel the cold, her resistance melting away. As he held her, she could feel his strength, his power, his control. It was. But then he pulled away and said, "I don't want to do anything without your consent." And then he walked away and sat in the chair. His eyes were dark and intense, piercing into her soul. She stood there, feeling dazed and confused. Her body ached, and she couldn't help but wonder what he had done to her. She wanted to run, to escape this nightmare, but she felt as if she were trapped in a strange, twisted dream. The figure reached into his pocket and produced a small vial filled with a dark liquid. He held it up, letting the light dance off its surface. "This will help you feel better," he said, his voice soft and soothing. "It will make everything all right." She hesitated, unsure of what to do. Part of her wanted to trust him, to believe that he could make things better. But another part of her was certain that whatever was in the vial would only make things worse. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Trust me." He held the vial out to her, offering it like a gift. She reached out, her hand trembling as she took it. The cold glass felt strange against her skin, and she couldn't help but wonder what it contained. "Drink this," he urged, his eyes pouring into hers. She raised the vial to her, feeling a shiver of fear as she swallowed the dark liquid, its way down her throat, filling her with a strange, warm sensation. Her vision blurred, and the room seemed to grow distant. She felt a strange sense of peace wash over her, as if all of her fears and doubts had been swept away by the tide. The figure smiled, and she could see the faintest glimmer of sadness in his eyes. "There," he whispered, "now you belong to me." As the word faded away, she felt herself drifting deeper into his embrace, surrounding to the darkness and the that coursed through her veins. She knew that she was his now, and that there was no escape from the strange twisted fate that had befallen her. Her last thought before she slipped into oblivion was that she was no longer afraid. When she awoke, she found herself in a dimly lit room, the air thick with the scent of sandalwood and myrrh. A soft velvet coverlet was strapped over her, and she felt strangely light, as if she were floating on a cloud. The figure from her dreams was nowhere to be seen. She sat up slowly, taking in her surroundings. The room was small and cozy, with windows that looked out onto a peaceful garden. Sunlight streamed through the glass, casting dappled shadows across the floor. She ran her fingers through her hair, feeling disoriented and confused. Something about the vial sheet didn't sit right with her. As she rose to her feet, she noticed a small table near the window, adorned with a simple meal, bread, cheese, and a flask of drink. Hunger pangs reminded her in what felt like days. She walked over to the table and sat down, picking up a piece of bread and taking a bite. It was warm and fresh, unlike anything she'd had before. The door to the room opened, and the figure from her dreams stepped inside. He was dressed in elegant robes that flowed around him like water, the colors of midnight, and he closed the door behind him, his eyes fixed on her. She felt a shiver of anticipation run down her spine. He walked over to her, his steps silent as a whisper. He knelt before her, his hands clasped in front of him. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice soft and caressing. She took another bite of bread, considering her answer. "Strange," she admitted, "but not unpleasant." He nodded, seeming satisfied with her response. "You are now one of us," he said, his voice taking on a new commanding quality. "You belong to me, and you will do as I say." Her heart raced at his words, but she found herself unable to resist him. He rose to his feet, offering her a hand up. As she took it, he led her across the room to a tall, ornate mirror. Her reflection stared back at her, but something was different. Her eyes were no longer the color of the daddy eyes, but now held a strange, eerie glow. "You have been gifted with my powers," he exclaimed, his fingers along her cheek. "You can now control the minds of men, compel them to do your." She gazed at her reflection, unable to believe the transformation. "What about my life before this?" she asked, her voice trembling. My family, my friends, can they ever know what happened to me?" He turned her to face him, his eyes pouring into hers. "They will forget you ever existed," he said coldly. "You're mine now, and you will live out your days in service to me and my kind. There is no escape." She wanted to protest, to fight against his words, but she found herself unable to muster any defiance. Instead, she asked the one question that in her heart. "What is your name?" His lips curled into a smile. "I am known by many names," he said, his voice filled with pride. "But you may call me Jimin." "Jimin?" The name sent a shiver down her spine. He was everything she had ever been taught to fear, and yet she couldn't deny the strange sense of power and belonging that coursed through her veins whenever he was near. "Come," he said, taking her hand again. "There is much for you to learn and much for you to experience. Our world is vast and full of wonders, and you will be my mate through it all." As they left the room, she knew that there was no turning back. She was now a creature of the night, bound to Jimin's will, and destined to explore the dark, twisted paths of his domain. 너무 지켜야 함정 너무 아름다워